Hello, folks. Getting the rest of the world online here, and waiting for everyone to lock in. Still waiting for a few of the streams to lock into the world, but looks like we're starting to get there. Okay. I think we're all here. Wonderful. We've got a second or two to spare before we hit the magic mark of 2 p.m. So I will. Oh, no voice, she says. Well, now that's a problem. Here we go again. Yes, voice. Okay, good. All is well. Okay, that's all I wanted to know. So we're working. We believe we're working anyway, and that's a very, very, very good thing. Okay. Let me get just a little closer here. So today, for today's deep dive, I wanted to look at a track that is on the surface not necessarily obviously all that complicated a recording. It's a little more intimate in scope and scale, but I thought I would demonstrate that sometimes the simple can actually prove to be even more challenging to put together. So this song is called Fall from the Sky, and let me just play a little bit of it to get it in your ears if you're not familiar with the track. Goes a little something like this.
Silent and clear, just like a tear that falls from your eye. Oh, the world's inside my head. I'm far from the starry-eyed innocent. And the words that I have said will burrow down underground, waiting for the sunrise.
Okay. So you get a sense of that track. Guitar, voice, maybe a couple of other guitar voices that come in. Why do I posit that this is a complicated track? Well, in earlier deep dives, I've sort of talked about my process of working with click tracks, of thinking about finding tempos, programming tempo changes, finding something that's elastic. It breathes organically. But I felt like this song needed to breathe perhaps more organically than I really was going to be able to put a click to. I wanted to be able to be a little more spontaneous when I was tracking the song, especially the opening and closing introductions and sung verses. Juxtaposing that with the notion that at some point, maybe in the middle of the song, kind of where you just heard, the first chorus, I thought I might want something that was a little more regular in pulse. So I had the brilliant idea to track it in different sections. Let me just track it, the opening bits without a click. Then I'll track the outro without a click. And then I'll track the middle section with the click. And that'll give me everything I'm looking for. Strategically, that might not have been a bad way to go about it. But in practicality, it proved that in fact I wasn't able to accurately gauge what the tempo needed to be once it became more regular in the middle of the song. Versus the sort of organic flow at the beginning and the end. So once I edited together that free flow with the more locked, rigid middle section, I began to have second thoughts. And part of those second thoughts meant that I realized there needed to be a little more organic flow, even in what I thought was going to be regularly metric. And what I thought was going to be regularly metric, I didn't really have the right tempo for. And so what that resulted in, I'll call your attention to this screen here. I'm going to zoom in a little bit on the track. So I tracked it with nylon string guitar, left and right, a stereo recording. We talked about that in the past. I did not sing, so it was just an instrumental, and then I overdubbed my voice for a number of reasons that I'll get to in a second. All well and good. You see this opening section here. No big edit, one long set of performances for a while. A little bit of editing here. Maybe I decided to put together two different takes. It's possible. Gets a little more regular here, but what the hell is happening here? And that's where you can see, in order to deal with my fragmented sense of time, I ended up having to cut the recording up into short little phrases. Each one of these little blocks here is a phrase that I then have to edit together. And some of this gets time stretched. We've talked a little bit about doing that with giving you a warning. So even the small phrases might be stretched or compressed to try to make it feel organic. I mean, if I show you all the edit points, you realize, my God, the guy just didn't get it right. And then it gets good again. Then it's long chunks. But this little section here is full of edits. And I can't really pull this thing apart enough to show you what it sounded like unedited, but I can solo up this guitar. Let's play it from here and see what we hear in terms of this longer section, which you'll be able to visually see one unedited performance here, and then what happens once we get into this section as the edits move by. So starting here at what's labeled bar 75, it's completely not important that it be so, but we'll know where we are. It gets a little more regular. But that middle section was completely chopped up, and listening to it soloed like that, it's clear. I mean, you can hear some of those bad edits. I could have massaged them a little better. I didn't. I moved really quickly. I think in some ways they're not massaged because I probably wasn't sure that they were at the right feel, the right place, and probably anticipated going back in and maybe sliding things a little bit. This little section of this song took me so much time to put together in a way that felt naturally played. And really, in the end, had I just let go of the notion of a click and the notion that maybe the middle of the section needed to be more regularly paced, and instead thought as a performance, when you get to the middle, maybe don't do so much the slow down, speed up, just keep it somewhat rolling. At the same time, do it in an organic way, right? So instead, you use these technologies, you use the ability to edit, to time stretch, to time compress, to recreate some notion of the organic, authentic. And there, it's all a big lie. It's exposed for you to see. Now, had I known or had I planned on doing this song with just my guitar and my voice, I might not have done all this click-tracky stuff. But I did anticipate that I would overdub some other instruments on the track. And that's where I started to feel like I might need that more metric start, stop. Even if just a notion of, well, where do I start? Will I come in with the guitar that I originally recorded? You know, if you're a decent enough musician, and I've done this many times in the past and worked with many musicians who could do it, of course you can. You don't necessarily need something going 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 to get you to the downbeat. You just sort of feel what the phrase is supposed to be. But I think this is not uncommon for artists who may be self-produced and self-engineer to sometimes confuse their producer head with their artist head. And you introduce engineering techniques into a process that doesn't actually need them. So live and learn, kids. Okay, so that's sort of zooming into this little section where this little kludge of constant editing is happening. But let's maybe add a little bit of what those instruments might be. So when I come back, I can look at here and say, okay, I see my nylon string guitar plays from beginning to end. Well, where are the overdubs? Ah, look down here. All of what I'm labeling, acoustic guitar 1, DI, mic, etc. In other words, there is a microphone on the guitar and a direct signal from the bridge pickup being blended. I've done this many times on some of the other tracks we talked about that with acoustic guitars. But you'll also note that I number them. Acoustic guitar 1, DI and mic. Acoustic guitar 2, DI and mic. In other words, I am treating these as not a stereo pair, one performance recorded in stereo, but again, rather that doubling, a double tracking. One channel, the other channel. So let's roll back to here. And we'll hear, I guess to start with, why don't we listen to, I don't know if I did create an acoustic guitar grouping. Yes, I did. Here. So I'm going to get rid of my nylon guitar and instead listen to the overdub guitars, which sound something like this. Now you can hear that they are a different timbre than that nylon string guitar. You know, they're actually doubling. Let me roll back and play you that same section, only now I'll put that nylon string guitar back in the mix. So this would be pretty much, other than the voices, all of the sound that you would be hearing at this point in the song. And you'll note that the acoustic guitar overdubs are simply doubling completely what I played on the nylon string guitar. So in terms of musical information, it's very redundant. There's no new counterpoints, there's no new harmonic language. But if you were a symphonic composer, your orchestrations, oftentimes it's how do we put different instrumental timbres together to do the same part to create a different sound. And that's basically what I'm doing here. Actually, I'm going to roll that back just a little bit, partly because there's a lot of processing dealing with all those edits. You can hear all this the noise that's happening. Sorry, my computer is straining. Hopefully it found a little more buffering. But let's see just the nylon string a little bit ahead of those acoustic guitars so we get a sense of the transition, as it were. Okay, right. So that's the basic palette. That is the song in terms of instrumentation for the most part. Other than that, it will double up what happens in the verse, and we'll hear that chorus again. Playing with the timbre is one part of that, so nylon string versus acoustic guitar, but also situating those acoustic guitars in a different pseudo space, as it were. So much more reverberant quality chambers, so that I'm not so much doing that with the nylon string, a little bit I am, but it's the acoustic guitars that create that sense that we've changed location. We're in some larger kind of headspace, as it were. Okay, now what about the vocal? Well, the vocal is not unlike the way I treated these guitars. So we'll take us out of solo mode if we, just for a moment here. So what I did with my main vocal is, you can see it labeled here, vocal. You can see my vocal compress. What is that? Again, something we've talked about in earlier deep dives, but it is a doubling of the main vocal, but heavily processed through an intense compression and with a tiny bandwidth of frequency, upper mid frequency boosted, everything else cut away. Again, showing you what that looks like. This is everything that's missing, and this is what's left. It's this little peak here, as well as a bunch of compression on that track. So that's, again, so that my voice comes through just a little more clearly in the overall mix. But then next to that, you'll see labeled here, vocal chorus doubles. That's simply what it sounds like. When we get to the choruses, I double my voice. Not only do I double it, but I pan it left and right, just as I would do those acoustic guitars. But in a really lazy way, now that I look at it, what I'm calling the main lead vocal, you can see it's here, it's panned to center for the most of the song. I have a feeling that we're going to watch this thing, since I can see the chorus double vocal is over here, much more in the right channel. I bet we're going to watch this thing move itself over to the left channel when we get to the chorus. So let me just expose a little vocalness here. I takes my chances, right? So my voice soloed, and I'm not even sure if any of the a little bit of the reverb is going to come with, but not as much as I would like, probably. Anyway, we'll see. So here's what happens from one voice and then getting doubled into two.
Just like a tear that falls from your eye, oh, the world's inside my head. I'm far from the starry-eyed innocent, and the words that I have said will burrow down underground, waiting for the sunrise.
Right. So there you go. A little vocal doubling, slightly, not hard panned left and right, but nonetheless identifiably one voice in one channel, one voice in the other. One might ask, why? Why not have your little song, your little nylon string guitar, your little voice? Just play the song. If you were to come see me in a little house concert setting, perhaps, that's exactly how you would hear it. There'd be no vocal choruses, no added acoustic guitar. The song has to sort of work in its own stripped down way. And I think in some ways it can be very compelling if I happen to be in your living room with you. But in the distance sort of mediated thing of a recording, and especially in the context of an album with big drums and orchestras and all sorts of things going on, we've sort of set the perspective to be a little larger than that kind of intimate scale. It's as if you had a focal lens on your camera, and you've got to set it so that you make sure you get that entire orchestra and the drums and the band and the giant stadium sound you're going for. And then if you have all those people go away and have me sit in the little tiny field, you don't really see it. So instead, what we do is we create versions of that larger sound, but in a more intimate manner, or at least that's my approach. So that's why the doubled acoustics, the doubled vocals. And in a way, it's meant to do something to build a little bit of, I don't know, drama into the performance. You might get a little bored. It's pretty much the same thing over and over again. I don't have a bridge. I don't have a fancy guitar solo. It's just the verses and the choruses, and they play a lot. So adding these little color changes, I think, keeps you interested as a listener. That's what's behind it. All right. Well, now, so while I was recording this thing, I assumed that at one point I might overdub even more instruments in order to maintain that kind of drama in the song. So when Greg Porter was here to put down some bass parts on other tracks on the album, I said, oh, and here's this other one. It's very simple. I don't think it needs much, but, and I played it for him. And he said, yeah, I don't think it needs anything. And of course, the unconfident part of me is like, wow, he really hates this song. But instead, it was the opposite. He felt like it was a very strong song, a certain vibe and mood. He felt, sort of like the resistance of, I don't want to break this song by playing on it. And that's to his eternal good taste and credit. So he said, I really don't think it needs the bass. And I thought, well, okay, fine. Let's have a beer. But, in the back of my mind, I wondered, just those guitars and my voice, was it truly enough? So I kept working on the song, mixing it. And while I was mixing it, I would occasionally start singing little harmonies. And that was just sort of a goof for a while. But Darlene heard me doing that and said, maybe you should record some harmonies. And I thought, yeah, but harmonies, dissociated harmonies, who's doing the singing? Is it all these acoustic guitar players? Maybe, I don't know. Somehow in my mind, I didn't want to have voices appear out of nowhere. And yet, while I was mixing, voices kept appearing in my head. Sometimes you have to override the literal interpretation of an arrangement and just sort of think, something in my head and my heart or whatever is telling me these harmonies need to be there. So I said, okay, well, I'll try to put some quick harmonies down. Just, I don't know even what they're supposed to be. So I set up a microphone and just ran down a couple of harmony parts, maybe just as you sort of try them on. Maybe I don't need all these. Maybe I need some of these. Maybe I need to mix and match parts. It was more of a demo. But as often happens, the demo became the final thing. Darlene came back from her walk and I was like, ooh, so what do you think of this? And she said, oh, it's beautiful. I think that's it. That's it. I said, are you sure? Because I haven't really worked on it. It's not really, no, it's really great. Don't change it. So I took her word for it. Let's go to that section. Let's listen to what I ended up doing. So you see vocal chorus doubles. We're used to that. But then there's the harmony vocal, high 1, high 2. What does that mean? Well, you can guess. Low 1, low 2, mid 1, mid 2. 3-part harmony, evidently. High, mid, and low. 1 and 2 are exactly what you interpret. They are the same part. Doubled, and yes, panned across the stereo spectrum. So if we listen to them one at a time, they sounded something like this. Eventually we'll get there, probably.
Worlds inside our heads, far from our starry-eyed innocence. Words that we have said burrow down underground, waiting for the sunrise.
I mean, It's delicate. It's kind of pretty. So that's one part. And the way I do vocals when I track, I haven't really talked much about this, is, but I have talked about the producer hat versus the engineer hat versus the artist performer hat. When I'm in front of a microphone, I'm the performer. When I put the microphone in place, I am the engineer. And when I decide you should do some double tracking, I'm the producer. So a producer in a session, let's say someone else was producing me, part of their job would be to assess the value of my performance and would say, yeah, it was really good. I think you need to redo the second line of the second chorus. Oh yeah, why? Well, a little bit of intonation, or I don't think the phrasing fell right, or whatever it may be. I have found when I try to wear those two hats on at the same time, neither thing works. I neither do make good production choices, witness all this crazy click track problem, nor do I give good performances, because part of me is already in the assessing, plotting the correction edit mode. So in order to be free of that, I just try to sing. I'll sing a few takes, and then I'll put on the producer hat and assess what I've done. So in this case, what I'll do is when I need to make doubling, I don't go back and sing to myself to get the double. I just choose a decent take from one and a decent take from two, or maybe composites, different sets of composites. But I work with whatever I just sort of sang as quickly as possible, probably 3, maybe 4 takes at most, and try to make something out of it that way. So it's more of a process of assessing and editing than it is plotting the singing. And so having said that, let's roll back just a touch to hear the high part, and then I'll play the middle part and the low part so we'll know sort of how it all's supposed to fit together.
Words that we have said burrow down underground, waiting for the sunrise.
Okay, so there's that. I'm going to skip over to the mid, though something tells me that the way these tracks show up on the board is pretty much how I sang them. I probably went from high to low and then added this middle part instead of thinking in a very linear fashion. So here's the middle voice part on its own.
At our heads, far from our starry-eyed innocence.
No wonder it's the middle part. It's doing nothing. There's no movement, right? It's really boring.
Words that we've said.
So why the middle part? My hunch is that I didn't think there was a middle part. Rather, I probably envisioned a low part working with the high part and with my original vocal, which of course is the other.
Inside our heads,
Here's the low part.
far from our starry-eyed innocence. Words that we have said.
It's pretty rangy. It moves from higher to lower faster than I might normally want to do. Let's hear it. Let's hear it for the boy. Let's hear it with that high part. So we're missing, obviously, the main vocal, which will pull this thing together, I hope. But here's the two parts, theoretically, that were most additive to what we had, what I'd sung.
Worlds inside our heads, far from our starry-eyed innocence. Words that we have said burrow down underground, waiting for the sunrise.
And here's the thing that most vocal harmony groups know. And that's that often that sort of movement, lots of movement, because both those parts are moving around pretty much all the time, usually works best if someone else is barely moving at all. If everybody's moving all the time, it sort of becomes a question, well, who's the lead vocal at that part, right? Or for whatever reason, I haven't necessarily put my finger on the why behind it. But even your classic harmony vocal singers, not singing in groups, but even just two voice sort of things, like Emmylou Harris, say, who is a master at this thing. Her parts often don't move if she's singing a harmony to someone else. They're much more static. They move a little bit. Much more importantly is that they match the phrasing of the original. So sometimes it's like no show-offy harmony vocalist, but rather someone who's really deeply attuned to the lead vocal phrasing. You want to support that melody part without taking away from it. So let's put that boring middle one in there and see what its role is in the context of those more rangy harmony vocals. So here's the 3 without my lead vocal.
Worlds inside our heads, far from our starry-eyed innocence. Words that we have said, burrow down underground, waiting for the sunrise.
Yeah, kind of interesting. I mean, it's not groundbreaking harmony, but there is a certain something to that, I think. Of course, it needs the lead vocal to make complete sense, because the lead vocal is going to be doing pieces of everything you're hearing. So it's not actually a different part. It's rather getting doubled in different sections of these harmony vocals. So it becomes more a matter of emphasis than necessarily new information, though not always the case. There is a dominant 7 suspension resolution that's happening that I need all 4 voices to create. Sorry about the muso talk, but here's all of the vocals.
Oh, the world's inside our heads. We're far from our starry-eyed innocence. And the words that we have said will burrow down underground, waiting for the sunrise.
All right. So that's the big dramatic moment in the piece, really. And once those parts were done, Darlene said, "That's it. That's beautiful. That song is finished." And I thought, she's right. That song is finished. Except then I thought, no, she's not right. That song's not finished. So why wasn't it finished? Well, it comes back to the song, it turns out. When I was thinking about the meaning behind the lyric, behind the different settings of it, it opens, the narrator is sort of lying in bed, awake, not sleeping, contemplating maybe having a bit of a midnight existential crisis of sorts. And something about that insomnia anxiety moment, I felt like was getting lost in the overdubbing of instruments and vocals and lushness. I also wasn't sure what to do with the verse after all those doubled acoustic guitars came in. And so going back to songs like Think of the Night, where I ended up overdubbing the sounds of trains, the sounds of crickets and sort of things, creating soundscapes. And that's very prominent in the title track of the album as well. I decided, well, maybe there's a sound effect that might give me some sort of drama. And I realized that it's that sort of clock ticking. Maybe in the middle of the night, you can't really hear anything, but there is a clock ticking somewhere. So I decided to put a clock ticking, which is actually labeled stopwatch here, into the track. And I do it Well, you'll hear where I do it. I do it in the second verse. So let's roll back just a little bit and hear the entrance of the stopwatch.
The slow motion fall with no chance at all to land on my feet. And things fall apart like the sound of a heart skipping a beat. Oh, the world's inside our heads.
Okay, there's that stopwatch. Now, it's effective. It sounds like a clock ticking, and it implies that there is a mechanical rigidity to the moment. The problem is, remember how I cut up all those guitars to try to make them feel organic? You see all these edits here? Wouldn't you know, that's the moment in the song where lyrically it's time to bring in the clock. So now you've got a recording of a watch, a stopwatch in this case, but I've actually had to pitch shift it, time stretch it to make it line up with the tempo of the song, and then I've had to cut it up into little sections in order to feel like it's lining up with all of my ever-shifting guitar playing. So if you don't listen really closely, it almost feels like everything's back in that rigid time. But in fact, no, it's breathing. It's slowing down and speeding up the whole time.
The slow motion fall with no chance at all to land on my feet.
You'll not necessarily notice it when there's music playing, but I bet we'll hear it now. It's subtle, but it's there. And now something else happens. Musically, it needed to change. That's the change from the verse to the chorus. And the little gaps here and here are where the lyric says, things fall apart like the sound of a heart skipping a beat. I know it's pretty literal to skip the watch beat, but damn it, that's what I did. So there's a little hole in there. The nice thing about that is I was really not wanting, oh look, the stock market. I was not really wanting the tempo of the clock to keep going tick, 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 tick through the chorus. I did feel like it, so for a while there was no clock in the chorus. It just sort of stopped at the skipping a beat. But then it felt like, why did the clock go away? So instead I shifted the emphasis so that instead of hearing tick, 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 you just hear the tick, 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 tick. And that's what each one of these little boxes is. Its own little tick, 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 tick. Yes, kids, I copied and pasted and then had to manually line them up with each one of those beats because they're not to a click either. So you have all this mechanical stuff that you've actually cut up to make more organic, but in the service of making the listener feel like the music is subject to all this mechanical stuff. All right, so here's the point of the song. Here's everything in it with the watch.
The slow motion fall with no chance at all to land on my feet. And things fall apart like the sound of a heart skipping a beat. Oh, the world's inside our heads. far from our starry-eyed innocence.
I think that clock is almost essential now to the song. It's an afterthought in many ways. It's the last thing that, or next to last thing that got put on. But it's now become, for me as a listener, as important as any other musical element, maybe not as important as the voice and the first guitar, but important. That's the whole song. Or is it? Those of you with eagle eyes who pay attention to these things may have noticed up here, piano. Raise your hands if you've heard the piano. Yeah, there isn't one that you've heard yet. So, why do I have a piano track? Well, oh wait, is there something there? Why, yes. There it is, my piano part. Let's hear the golden piano part. I don't know why the track is there. Doesn't really do much for a little while. But soloing up the piano, here it comes. Yep, that's the piano. One note. However, if you've got headphones on, and I do recommend that for these things, you may note that it's still going even though I've stopped the machine. And that's because I'm routing that piano very low. You could probably barely hear it even over the hum of your computer or wherever you may be. Nonetheless, the piano is being treated to several things. Let's see, where did that line go? Oh, I see. Hold on. Bring you over. It's going to a long lexicon reverb. But I believe that lexicon reverb, which was over here, U, is also being routed to a delay. So what I'm doing is I'm taking the piano note, sending it to a very large reverberant chamber, and then having the reverb fed to a delay so that the reverberation continually recycles itself. It's a way of extending almost to infinity the reverberation, which even though it's longer than the piano note dying off, still reverberation does die over time. So what we're doing is creating a sort of fake way of extending that piano note, reverb and delay. Let me roll back so we hear that again. Where's my piano? There it is. So just listening to the piano and its treatment. And if you're in your headphones now, it's nearly inaudible by this point. But it does still continue to ring a little bit. Okay, that's a whole lot of what, and why. And here's the what and why. It's because after creating all of the drama in the arrangement by building guitars, vocals, ticking clocks, I thought that the opening verse, which is a double-length verse, felt too long. It felt pretty static. We've had a long guitar-only intro, and then the vocal comes in. So you see the guitar intro about to hear, and then the vocal comes in. At the halfway point of the verse, in between sections of the verse, is where that piano note happens. I'm going to play you from just where the voice comes in. So we've had a little guitar introduction. We'll hear the voice, and then you'll hear, if you're listening closely, because again, it's not very loud, but it's there, this piano thing.
And here in your arms, the silent alarm troubles the deep. Now nothing is wrong. Don't turn the light on. Just go back to sleep.
Okay. Now, you may think that that was not worth any effort at all. It certainly wasn't worth a lot of effort. And it was a very last minute decision. I think probably the day before I had to commit to a final mix for mastering. I decided, I've been hearing that piano note in my head for months now. I'm just going to put it down. I can't seem to let go of the notion that it needs it. It's going to be so unobtrusive in the mix that it's not going to disrupt anybody who's just deeply into the vocal performance. But it might reinforce a kind of icy, alone, sort of isolated moment where time is both ticking but also suspended, where time seems to drag on, which is why the notion of that piano note always ringing like a star in the sky, right? When we talk about the Webb photos from space, and someone pointed out, yes, all that brilliance that we're now able to see is so old that a lot of what you're seeing no longer exists in this present moment. So notions of time and distance and stars can be a little bit cosmic, as it were, in our minds. And that's a little way of tone painting that moment. All right, so that is truly all that there is in this song, Fall from the Sky. On the record, it's one of the most intimate, less large giganto production numbers, much more sort of brought down to scale. But hopefully you found that even in that setting, there's a lot that can be done through either subtleties like that piano or through thinking about, well, maybe as the drama of the song builds, because all that vocal harmony stuff doesn't happen until the second chorus. The first chorus is just doubled lead vocal. Next verse is the introduction of the clock with those doubled acoustic guitars continuing, so that verse is different from the first verse. Then the chorale comes in for that second chorus. And then what do? Do we bring in the booming orchestra? No, then it all dies away. And for the last verse of the song, it comes down to just the guitar and the voice. And that's it. And it's quite a bit of a long stretch of just guitar and voice. So even in the sort of arc, you start small, you get bigger, and then you bring it down. We do that musically, we do that with the arrangement, and we do that to some degree with the mix technique as well. So that's basically it. I hope you've enjoyed this one. We will rock out next time, explore something with all sorts of different sounds going on. But it's been a real pleasure to have you join me, and feel free to make some comments or let me know if you like what you're hearing. Let me know if there's questions you may have about what we're doing. Feel free to do that in the chat windows, or contact me through alanwilliamsevidence.com, and I will try to get back to you and or respond to it here at another one of our deep dives. So thanks for tuning in. Thanks for your time. We'll see you next week. Take care.